Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, damsels and dingbats. Today, I would like to talk about boats. More specifically, tall ships. These things, I absolutely love them. I wish I were a pirate. No, actually, I just wish I were alive in the day when you could hop on one of these and take 6 months to get across the ocean and get violently sick and get Lyme disease. No, I really think it would be cool to captain one of these, or just be a crew member on one at port when you don't have to do anything. I have loved these ships since I was a child, and I've tried my hand at building die-cast models and balsa wood models and this and that. And several years back, I discovered paper modeling. I discovered I wasn't any good at it, but I discovered paper modeling. And somewhere along the line over the last, dozen years, at some point I had a bunch of paper, and I had some glue, and I had some scissors and some paint, and I got it into my mind to use them to make something. And I ended up making my first paper ship. I don't know if you would classify this as paper craft, or paper mache, or paper mess. Regardless, it's something that I started doing many years ago, and the first ship I made for my nephew, who was just a little tiny tot, and he loved it, and it gave me something to do. And every 2 or 3 years, I'll get a wild hair up my butt, and I'll decide it's time to make another one. And each one I make gets a little bigger, and a little more detailed, and a little more complicated. And I'm not an expert, not yet. I figure I still have a fleet of these things to make before I've mastered the art. I've taught myself how to do this. I started doing this back before the whole YouTube thing, and actually back then I didn't even have a computer, so I was never really online. I am sure you could go online and find 1.5 million people that make things like this and do a lot better job. I mean, I have seen some paper craft in my time that I flat refuse to believe that these things are made out of paper. It's just ridiculous. Mine are clearly made out of paper, but I am proud of the fact that my little ships are ugly, because you can look at them and you can tell, hey, this thing is made out of paper and glue and paint, and I would be surprised if there's anything more complicated than that in this mess. But like I said, I've been making these on and off for several years, and more recently, getting into the YouTube videos, I've discovered that, once in a while I like to do something other than gameplay videos, and I started to get the urge, get that little tickle in my craft fingers, telling me that it's getting on time to make another one of these. So I was like, oh, hey, I could make another one of these, and I can document the process kind of vaguely. This is not an instructional video by any means. But what I decided to do was take the camera on my phone, and each step that I took in the process of making this ship, I photographed. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to put them together in a video here and show you step by step how I come up with my conglomerate little piles of art. I don't know. Anyway, I thought it'd be a cool little project, and that's what I did. So this is the ship I will be working on now. The ones that you saw earlier were my earlier ships that I made. The first one was for my nephew. That was not the first one I actually made, but that is the oldest one that is still surviving. They tend to get old and brittle and fall apart. The second one is one that I made probably about 4 years ago. It's been sitting on top of my computer ever since, gaining dust and cobwebs. And this last one I showed you, the green one here, is the one that I made specifically for this video. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you what it takes to put together one of these piles. Alright, so starting out, we have three basic components. We have Elmer's glue, paper, and scissors. I like to use printer paper just because it's cheap. The first thing I like to do is glue a couple pieces of paper end to end. And then I cut the front end to the curve of the front of the hole that I would like, and I put some more paper down on front of that to keep it stuck together. Sometimes these things like to come apart when the glue's wet. These are simply pieces of paper that I have put a crap load of glue on and folded in on themselves repeatedly. These I will be using for support struts. These help me to keep the shape of the ship as I go. The hull itself is just, actually the top deck here is just a couple pieces of paper glued together with a couple more pieces of paper glued on top of that. I suppose you could use construction paper to save on regular paper, but I don't like construction paper. So here we've folded it in half, and we're going to go ahead and trace the outline of the half of the deck, the top deck that we want. The reason I do it this way is so that when I cut it out and unfold it, I've got a perfect, they're the same on both sides. Once I got the outline of the deck, I go through and I put these little tabs on it, because I find when I glue this upper deck to the hull, if I have these little tabs to glue to the hull, it's just a lot easier than trying to glue a flat piece to a round piece. You can see here, once I have it all cut out and the tabs folded up, you can kind of see what I mean. I put the glue on those tabs, insert it into the hull, and then I have a nice flush fit. Here what I've done is I've discovered that my paper, it was just a little bit floppy. It wasn't quite rigid enough, not enough structure, so I just glued it down on another sheet of paper, let it dry, and then later on I cut it back out. That extra piece of paper gave it a little more rigidity, a little more stiffness. Going back to the hull, I went down to the bottom and I pinched the form into, the basic shape I wanted. So that way when I unfolded it, not only do I have the hull starting to form, but I can see the lines where the actual body lines are going to be. Here you can kind of get a better look of what I'm talking about, even though there's no structure yet. Everything's kind of floppy and loose. So I start putting in these support structures, these braces that we made out of the folded up paper. Start putting those in. Go in and I cut that top deck back out. You can see what I mean. You can tell by looking at it. It's got a little more rigidity. That's going to help the ship maintain its shape, and it's also going to help the hull maintain its shape, in theory. I go through and I use some of these support braces that I made. I cut them to shape and I fit them to the bottom. This is the upper deck. So I glue these to the bottom of the deck. This is going to help, all of this is to help the deck and the ship maintain its shape. Other than the support structures inside the ship that you can see here, the ship is otherwise hollow. So until I start putting more layers of paper on the outside later, I need this thing to be able to hold its shape. And you'll see why here soon. I did not put enough structural joints inside this ship. You can see I put a few in to hold the outer edges, the outer contours in place. But, and this here is the back of the boat. The front's been pinched together and glued. The back is open, so I needed to make this piece to fill in the back. The next step I take is to mount the deck into the hull. So you can see I've done that here, and now the ship's starting to take shape. It's rigid enough that it holds up under its own weight. You can see what I mean about those body lines now when I went through and pinched the glue. I've put in the foremast here. But I noticed at this point I did not have enough internal structure, and I've got a really bad, like the back end here, you can see it's kind of crumpling a little bit. The whole thing's slightly askew. It took me a while to realize I had a massive warp in this ship. You can see here the shape. I lost the shape. The back and the front, or it's just warped in every direction you can imagine. I had to actually go in and cut a lot of it out and remold it. See over here on this side, when you lay it flush against the table, it's actually flat and it's straight, which is what I'm looking for. But over here on the other side, you can see that it's actually up off the table, and we can't have that. We don't want our boat being all. So I had to go cut a lot of stuff out and reform it. And this is where it's a lot like paper mache, because you cut stuff out and you lay strips of paper down. Eventually I did get the shape I was looking for. It's still got a little bit of a warp in it, but as we go and we keep adding more to the boat, we're going to lose a lot of that warp. So this here is good enough. I can work with this. I've got the basic shape. I can start working on other parts of the boat. Now, a lot of the glue inside the ship is still drying, so I don't want to mess with it too much. I do cut the hole for the main mast. I decided that this ship's going to be a sloop. It's going to be a small, single-masted boat. I'm beginning to work on the cabin here. I decided I kind of wanted a sloped back. I was looking for more of a, like an open deck on the back. So when I cut it out and I cut the deck out, I realized I want to put some steps in before I put the deck down. So I went ahead and made my steps. I got them. I got the glue on that drying, and then I went back and I cut the hole in the deck where I wanted the stairs to go down in. Mind you, there's nothing in the ship. It's just a big hollow ship. So if you're a tiny sailor and you're interested in buying this boat, some renovation required. Okay, you can see I was talking how I wanted the back area, the deck. It just did not turn out the way I was hoping it would. I didn't want to go remake this whole thing, so I decided, okay, I'll do something else with this later. For now, I went in and I cut the front door. I intend to put a window, at least one window in here. I'm going to have my control panel and all that in here. So I went through and I cut the floor in the back so that when I put the stairs in, you can actually see them. There's actually another door in the back of the cab. I decided I'm going to go ahead and just make this deck area. I'm going to make it part of the cabin. I'm just going to turn these into really big windows. So I cut out the side profile for the windows, and I mounted it on the ship to make sure that it was actually going to fit the way I wanted it to. I had to go in and put some extra bits, pieces of paper here and there to kind of fill it in and make it look better. But I got all of the alignment done, and I got it sitting on the boat. It's all looking good. So I go ahead and glue it down, and I get the steps in there. Now I'm going to start making windows. I need to fill in this back gap that was originally going to be a deck. Now I want it to be part of the cabin. So I go ahead and I make this, I decided I wanted to get a little fancy here. So I made these fancy little window. And that's going to curve over that back opening on the ship that I left open when I was intending to make it, like this. And then I had to put, like I said, I had to add some extra pieces of paper in, so I got a little artsy. I'm thinking, okay, I got kind of this elven thing going on. They like all these swirly patterns and stuff like that. So I'll go ahead and focus on that detail for the ship. I go ahead and cut out the windows I was talking about for the control area. And then I realized I've got all this crap glued down. I can't. How am I supposed to get the control panel in there? And when I have it in there, how am I supposed to paint it? So I struggled with that for a little bit. I went ahead and did some more detailing on the back. I put in the side windows, and I put in the molding. You can see in front of the windows, I've got just little decorative pieces that I've put on. On this side, I decided I wanted you to be able to have as many viewpoints on that control panel as possible. So I cut the side window out, that little circle there, and I went ahead and made the little control panel. This thing's probably about the size of my thumb, the last joint on my thumb, mind you. That steering wheel is smaller than my thumbnail, so that was fun. Never done anything like that before. I went ahead and laid down strips of paper on my deck, and the platform over, it's kind of like a support for my mast when I put it in. That's to give it kind of that wood look when I'm finished. At this point, I'm like, all right, I got to get this console in here. I was having problems fitting it through the door and the window, so I just cut the roof off this stupid thing. I'm like, okay, I'll cut the roof off. I will go back later, and I'll do something with that. I ended up making another window, kind of like a sunroof that went up over the top. Forgive the itchy dogs. Again, I'm sure you guys are getting used to that by now. These are the rails. These were fun. Not. Usually I make my rails out of one piece of paper. This is actually a rolled up piece of paper that's been cut into tiny little nubbies and glued onto a folded piece of paper, and that took forever to dry, and they didn't come out straight, but hey, whatever. This is an anchor, as you can tell, and the chains are individually linked. Individual little links of paper. That's something I'd never attempted before. Probably not something I'll ever do again. The mast, rolled up pieces of paper. Everything's paper, surprise. The little pieces of rope that you see over there are just pieces of paper that I cut very thin, and then I kind of rolled between my fingers until I got that rope shape. So I glued one of those onto my mast so that I could get an idea of the shape of the sail. The sails are just pieces of paper that have been wadded up and crumpled and smoothed out, and just over and over and over again. I found out that if you run it under water, just tap water, and then wring it out a couple times and let it dry, it gains a really nice cloth look to it. So the rail's dry. I've got it all connected. It's one long rail, and it's still a little tacky, so I have to let it dry a little bit longer. So I take the time to go in and cut the first sail to shape. Now, you'll have to forgive me. Like I said, I took these photos with my phone, and for some reason a couple of them just did not turn out very well, but you get the basic idea here. I decided to leave the mast free floating so I could take it out and put it back in, and it swivels to the left and to the right a little bit. I have it sitting in here, and I took a picture just so I could see what the clearance over my cabin was going to be. I also made a little stand. At this point, I need the boat to be able to support itself so that I can work on it with both hands and not have to hold it. And this is one of the reasons why now I am gluing the railing on and forming it, and I need to be able to hold it with both hands. It's not like anchored into the paper or anything. It's just glued on there. And but you can see it didn't turn out too bad. I mean, there are some things I would probably do different next time, but this is a learning experience for me. I put strips of paper along the side, just like I did on the deck, to give it that wood look, and then I filled in the front gap of the rails with a couple shields and some ornamental swooping swirls. Here you see I've got both of the sails on. I go ahead and I add guide strips along both sides of the boat just for, accentuating. I got the rudder last minute. I was kind of like, the back end's looking a little dull, so we'll make a rudder. Flat, dull, non-gloss black spray paint as a base. And then I just go in and, I decide on a color pattern. And I next step is going through and just doing a light, painting here and there. And eventually, when it's all done and said, you got the final product. The paint on these, you could tell it was still a little wet. I took the pictures immediately after spray painting. When you have this amount of detail in something, you want to make sure that you got everything.
You know, make sure you put on several coats. Make sure that you spray paint at different angles to catch all your little hidden areas. But when everything's done and said with the paint, this is the final product, which you've seen already, and now you know how I did it. We take a couple closer looks here and there. You can see the deck and the ropes on the mast, the little shields and the swooshes on the front, which I really don't know what, other than being an extension of the rails, I don't know what function those would serve other than I wanted to put them there. The windows didn't quite turn out the way I would have liked. I would have liked a more metallic golden, but, my paint's old and it didn't mix well with the base paint. But, it's paper, so I can live with it. Got the rope guides and all of that running through. Up at the top of the mast, I've actually got a little wheel that I made that the rope goes up and guides through. Just little things that I've never done on my ships before that I decided, as I was going that, hey, let's try this, let's try that. So why I said here before too long, after I've made another 2 or 3 dozen of these things, I should have some pretty nice ships, because I'm constantly trying new things. Like this anchor here, I've never done an anchor before. Probably shouldn't have done this one. But now I know how to make anchors, and next time I do it, it'll be better. And it's a hobby. It's something to do. Normally I would take a little more time with the paint and kind of make it all look really, really nice. But I wanted to get this stuff done so that I could make the video for it and I could show it to you. And I have done so. So I hope you guys enjoyed the quick little jaunt through the chaos that is my artistic skills. And next time I make one of these, I will record it and post it up for you so you guys can see how crappy that one is too. So I've been your host, DM Renavion, saying till next time, you guys stay safe. Have fun. I'm out.